Okay, so we're gonna go over the reproductive system. So basically, the what we have is the female include can create oocytes. They have mammary glands for furnishing a body, a baby. Anatomy has ovaries that lead to a uterine tube, and the uterine tube leads to uterus, which is separated from the vagina from the cervix and exits the body. So we have the vulva. Um, we have the labia. We have like okay, so we have look at it. We have a pad of adipose tissue to cushion the pubic symphysis in females, and it's referred to as mons pubis or mons veteris. It's covered with pubic hair. And we have the labia major, majus, labia minus, and it's developed in the same tissue that becomes scrotum in men. So labia minora develops from the same tissues in the embryo, the spongy urethra of the penis in men. Vagina orifice is the opening to vaginal, while urethra orifice is the opening to urethra and bladder. And the clitoris has lots of blood vessels and nerves, and is capable of enlargement and erection when a woman is sexually aroused. It's kind of similar to the glans penis in the males. And the whole area is referred to as the vestibule, which is the region between two labia minora and inside the vagina orifice is the hymen. The bulb and vestibula is the erectile tissue that swells during intercourse and applies additional pressure to the penis. So, we have large uterus at the end by vaginal canal leads to the two fallopian tubes at the end of the suspended ovary. And the female gonads and size of almond produces female filaments called secondary oocytes. When ovulate can mature and to ovum to fertilize sperm. Ovaries are responsible for secreting a variety of hormones like estrogen, progesterone, inhibin, and relaxin. And it has three ligaments. It has the broad ligament, which is the fold of the peritoneum, which is the large flat tissue, and part of the peritoneal membrane holds the posterior side of ovary in place. We have the ovarian ligament, which holds the ovaries to the uterus, which connects between ovary and the uterus. We have suspensory ligament, which holds the ovaries to the pelvic wall, and the posterior side of the ovary is the ridge where broad ligaments wrap around and where blood vessels can enter the ovary and heal them. So the broad ligament, right, is the fold of the peritoneum, while the ovarian ligament holds the ovary to the uterus, and the suspensory ligament holds the ovaries to the pelvic wall. So as females age, these ligaments can weaken and sag in the pelvic cavity and cause the organs to push down on the vaginal canal. And prolapse can be redeemed by the tucking the uterus back in the posterior side. So the histology, right? We have the germinal epithelium. And this one is basically what it does is it's a simple colloidal and let me double check something real quick. Okay, so the germinal epithelium, right? It has simple colloidal and simple squamous epithelium. And the tunica albumin is dense, irregular connective tissue. And the cortex is dense, and there's two types of cells. We have the oocytes, and the cells surrounding oocytes are called follicular cells when the folliculars are young, and granulosa cells when follicles mature. And we have primordial follicles, which are the embryon begins beings with primordial germ cells in the fetus, and it starts to develop into the cells called oogina, which are cells that are diploid. So we say two copies of chromosomes that go through all meiosis. So oogina are stem cells that become oocytes. Oocytes are going to become mature ovum or egg. So females are born with all the oogina that they have, and most of them from the embryonic stage until you are sexually mature at 12, 15 are going to die. Very few of the 2 million original make it, and death is called atresia, where germ cells degenerate and die. Those that survive and grow is because of primary oocytes. Primary oocytes are diploid because they haven't gone through meiosis. They begin and turn into the first round of meiosis, which is prophase 1, and they stop and hold themselves in prophase 1 until puberty. During puberty, the primary oocytes in the primordial follicle can be identified. They have very large cell, and every month, only one of these primordial follicles containing one of these primary oocytes are going to mature to the point of ovulation. Every month, while one of them is maturing to ovulation, many more are dying off. Only 400 primordial follicles get to be ovulated, and so she has 400 eggs. So after puberty, every month, like FSH and LH stimulate the maturation of primordial follicles into primary follicles. Follicle cells are squamous, single layer, when already developed into it. And they are dividing into large, so more than one layer. And every month, 4 to 5 develop to primary follicles. One primary follicle is going to progress in many in the next stage called secondary follicle. Many granulosa cells develop small pockets of follicular fluid, which start to develop within the area of the granulosa cell. In the secondary follicular state, you see pockets of follicular fluid. The oocyte inside the center is called primary oocyte. The pockets of the follicular fluid will merge to one large pocket called an antrum. Some granulosa cells stay stuck to the oocyte called the corona radii or the radiating crown of the egg. And there's like oocyte and secondary follicle is going to progress over the course of a month and develop to mature to tertiary. The antrum is large and filled with follicular fluid, which surrounds 2 to 3 of the oocyte and signs of it being ovulated. So once it goes to the tertiary follicle stage, this is when the primary follicle is going to start to go through meiosis too. So this is initiation of oocyte. So this begins to meiosis 2 and it's called secondary oocyte only at the end of the tertiary follicle phase. When it starts as a tertiary follicle, it's called primary follicle. Right before it gets ovulated, it is called a graphican and is changed to secondary oocyte because it has finished meiosis 1 and started to round to meiosis 2. We have ovary histology, right? So, secondary oocyte is being ovulated, and handful of primordial follicles are going to convert to primary oocyte every month. So, it's all the same follicle, just different parts of the month. The ejected ovum is referred to as a secondary oocyte and is not alone. The corona radii, those granular sites that surround the oocyte get ejected along around it. Okay, so I'll give you guys a summary. So oogenia, right? The primary oocyte begins meiosis 1, but does not finish meiosis 1 and start meiosis 2 and become until it becomes a secondary oocyte. And that is in the process of ovulation. It won't finish meiosis 2 unless sperm is ready to fertilize it, and then it's called ovum. Okay, let's talk about ovulation. This is when the follicle is nursing out. So the second oocyte and corona radii surrounding oocyte is a structure on the inside, while the yellow gel is the corona radii cell. Every time the oocyte bursts out of the ovary, quite destructive, it leaves scar tissue from ovulation. And bursting out of ovum causes destruction to the ovary on the outside, and there a bit of blood clot. So the uterine tubes The ovaries are not physically attached to the end of the uterine tube. Once the oocyte is ovulated, it needs to be swept into the uterine tube to travel towards the uterus, and it's held in place by a peritoneum. It helps the sperm and oocyte reach each other, which is a great space for the sperm because the oocytes want to meet each other in the right pH. Because the lower immune system responds, so the female immune cells won't attack the sperm cells. So this is a great area for it. Um, So the structures that help move the oocyte towards the uterus would be the fimbriae of the uterine tube that help direct the ovum into the fallopian tube. And the lining of the uterine tube is called ciliated simple columnar epithelium tissue. Okay. And and then there's the muscularis, it's a layer of smooth muscle that has peristatic contractions to move the ovum towards the uterus. Okay. So the site of fetal implantation, as egg gets fertilized, it's called a zygote, and then travels down the urine tube and begins to develop and become an embryo. And the embryo will land on a uterine wall and embed itself and start to mature into a more mature embryo and then fetus. The fallopian tubes are 4 inches long, and it takes a few days for the zygote to travel and rely on cilia. The uterus is smaller in postmenopausal women because if they no longer produce sex hormones, the uterus shrink and gets smaller, held in place by the ligaments. So we have the fundus, the body, the isthmus, and the cervix. And the prolapse will cause a fall in pelvic cavity to squish up along the vagina. So perimetrium is the visceral periosteum. It has simple squamous and areolar connective tissue because it's serous membrane and broad daylight. Broad ligament. The myometrium is the 3 layers of smooth muscle. It helps produce contractions during childbirth. It's stimulated to contract by hormones from semen that causes prostaglandins and trigger contractions to help sperm along. We have the endometrium, the layers that lines the lumen of the uterus, and it's highly vascularized. It's simple columnar epithelium. And stratum functionalis is a layer that fills up and becomes thicker during the uterine cycle and shed during menstruation. The stratum basalis is the permanent layer that's between the myometrium and the endometrium. It never sheds. So the one that sheds is the endometrium. Endometrial or uterine glands get passed through office and secretes hormone and mucus. Every time a female goes through menses and she'll shed the stratum functionalis, not only blood but tissue gets secreted because there's a lot of capillary beds in the endometrium. When the tissue is shed, it will look bloody because of the residue blood in the capillary beds. So events in the ovaries that result in ovulation. So as ovary goes through the ovarian cycle, mostly influenced from 2 hormones in the pituitary gland. Ovary will secrete estrogen and progesterone, which will influence the uterine cycle. As ovaries start to develop, one follicle to ovulate the egg, the uterus starts to build up the endometrial lining into a point where egg is ovulated. In the next few days, the uterine line will develop and vascularize in preparation for implantation of the egg. If the egg is not fertilized, the menstruation will shed and endometrial line will be shed and the egg will be shed along with it. If egg gets fertilized but that fertilized zygote fails to implant in the walls of the uterus, it will shed along with menstruation. Menstruating egg did not get fertilized, it did not implant to the wall in the uterus. So they're changing the endometrial layer to prepare the uterus to receive embryo. And both are controlled by the endocrine system. So the FSH and LH are secreted from the pituitary gland and regulates the steps of ovarian and the uterine. The vagina. This is a tubular canal that opens outside the body and is for the penis for during intercourse. It ends with the cervix and the lateral wall, and there are folds called rugae. There's hymen, which is a thin fold of mucosa that covers. And penis causes trauma to the hymen, and the 2 layers of smooth muscles that can be contracted. There's no conscious control over it. And the female reproductive system, they have mammary glands. The nipple in men and women have Lascaris glands. And milk that is secreted is form of modified sweat. It's shaped like acinar glands and empty into ducts. There are multiple lobes and multiple alveoli. And the men, um, okay, so men produce semen like sperm and additional fluids and deliver females to female reproductive tract. The scrotum is a loose bag or container of tissues that contains testes. Um, and then the scrotum has the dartos, a muscle that's external, and its purpose is as it contracts, it will tighten the scrotum around the testes. While the cremaster muscle, it runs longitudinally around the spermatic cord and around the testes. So when the cremaster muscle contracts, it raises the testes towards the abdomen. And it basically regulates the temperature of the testes because sperms are particular about the temperature to develop properly. By tightening the scrotum around the testes, it could bring them when the male is colder, it bring them in. And there's a lot of connective tissue, but has testicular artery and testicular veins, as well as ductus deferens. There's a lot of lymphatic tissues and a lot of nerves. And it contains glands that produce sperm. So during fetal development, the testicles are held up in the abdominal cavity where the kidneys slowly descend down the abdominal wall. It's covered by two outer membranes, so the tunica vaginalis, which is the formed by the peritoneum double layer, and the tunica albuginea, which is a colored white. It's a white fibrous capsule. It has arms and legs that extend inward to separate testes into the various lobes. Each one of the extensions inward is called a septa. There are about 200 to 300 lobes per testes. Okay, so outside of the spermatogenesis and inside the lumen is so spermatogenesis occurs in the seminiferous um, tubules, and sperm is created with cells considered to be spermatogenic cells. Cells that become sperm are spermatogenia, and after meiosis, they will become spermatozoa, and they are haploids, so they make half the number of chromosomes. In order to make a zygote, you need half from dad, half from mom for 46. We have the nurse cell, which is the supports the magnetic cells and helps take care of them. Later, outside the seminiferous tubes that secretes the testosterone. So sperma to mature sperm cells would take rounds of division like meiosis 1, meiosis 2. Spermogenium cells are going to do normal random mitosis. Resulting cells are identical to parental. After meiosis, it will create primary spermatocytes having two copies of chromosomes. And um, the process is going from So basically, this is the head, has 23 chromosomes and will merge with the egg. It has a special vesicle called acrosomes that contains digestive enzymes that's going to puncture to the coronal radii of the female. And men produce about 300 and it varies from between species. So the seminiferous tubules, they move from the seminiferous tubules into neck enter epidermis. And the epididymis is where the sperm are going to mature and store. Tube is called ductus epididymis, which is 20 feet long. The sperm is going to mature there, is a lot of nutrients and survive. A male does not ejaculate sperm, it can stay there and doesn't get used when they and it can get replaced and reabsorbed with the fresh sperm. Ductus deferens is the what they transport sperm to urethra for ejaculation. So, ductus deferens has an inner mucosal layer and muscularis layer surrounded by three layers of smooth muscles that would do peristaltic contractions. It leaves out of scrotum and goes to os coxal to bladder before it enters urethra. And it's used for additional sperm storage and enters a series of ducts and ductus deferens and will enter into ejaculatory duct. And it's called the ampulla of the ductus deferens. The short duct is ejaculatory duct and is location of secretions of the seminal vesicles and will merge with secretions from vas deferens. So, the prostate provides food, citric acid used by sperm to make more ATP, and it clots semen and break down to liquid because you want semen to get stuck in the vaginal canal and give sperm time to be there. And the pituitary gland is a small amount. It produces mucus, which is going to help with lubrication, semen, and is going to made up with sperm plus all fluids similar. The female reproductive tract is acidic, and it can attack the sperm. So male sperm don't have a lot to survive. They don't have any organelles. And basically, the foreskin is a gland covered by the prepuce, which covers the uncircumcised gland's penis. And it has the dorsal, the ventral, and its erectile tissue has lumens or cavities within the erectile tissue and fill up with blood. Blood can't leave the penis because it pushes the dorsal side of the penis, where all the veins would normally return the blood back into the heart. So once a male has erection, all the erectile tissue filled with blood. Large amounts of blood enter in tissue, which will cause the penis to enlarge, and vein will get closed. And for Okay, so we have vasectomy, which is a vas deferens are cut and tied so that sperm cannot leave through the epidermis and the vas deferens. No blood vessels are cut so it can be reversed. While with the woman, the fallopian tubes or ovarian ducts are cut and be ligated and prevent oocyte from reaching uterus. The females will still ovulate and make eggs, but oocyte will not be able to make its way to uterus. So if she has sexual intercourse, the sperm can go up, but the oocyte would never make it to the fallopian tubes or uterus. And there's a lot with like different types of hormones. Um, and yeah. So it provides progesterone and estrogen to the female, and so it tricks her body that she's pregnant so she does not release or ovulate another egg. There's IUDs that irritate the uterus so the zygote can never implant. And yeah. With aging, um, ovaries stop making follicles, there's drop in hormones, there's no more normal levels of estrogen and progesterone, and that causes the ovaries and uterine tubes to shrink and get smaller. And there's an increase of bone loss.